100,000 exorcisms, one man, Father Amorth, the Vatican's real-life demon hunter. You're about to uncover the Vatican's darkest secrets. What if I told you one man claimed to fight the devil over 100,000 times? Meet Father Gabriele Amorth, the Pope's personal exorcist. You'll hear the screams, witness the unholy, and feel the fear. This isn't Hollywood. This is real. Continue listening, if you dare. Chapter 1. From Resistance Fighter to God Soldier. The night smelled of burnt earth and gunpowder. Modena, Italy, 1944. The moon hung like a shard of bone in the sky, casting jagged shadows over the ruins of a city that had once been a jewel of the Renaissance. Nazi patrols stalked the cobblestone streets, their jackboots echoing like death knells. But in the labyrinth of bombed-out buildings and secret cellars, a different sound pulsed, the heartbeat of the Italian resistance. Gabriele Amorth, 19 years old and lean as a blade, pressed his back against the crumbling wall of a derelict church. His breath fogged the air. In his hands, he clutched a Sten gun, its metal cold against his palms. Around him, 5 other partisans crouched in silence, their faces smeared with ash. Their mission was simple: ambush a German convoy transporting ammunition to the Gothic line. Simple and suicidal. Stasera diventiamo fantasmi, their leader, a grizzled mechanic named Carlo, had growled earlier. Tonight, we become ghosts. Amorth's pulse roared in his ears. He wasn't afraid of dying. Fear had been burned out of him the day he'd found his childhood friend, Marco, hanging from a lamppost in Piazza Grande, a sign around his neck. Traditore, traitor. Marco's crime, distributing anti-fascist leaflets. Amorth had stared at the body, swinging gently in the breeze, and vowed to make the black shirts and their Nazi masters pay. Now, as the distant rumble of truck engines grew louder, he tightened his grip on the gun. The ambush erupted in a storm of fire and screams. Amorth lunged from cover, his weapon spitting bullets. A German soldier crumpled, his helmet clattering to the ground. Chaos swallowed the street, muzzle flashes lit the dark like hellfire, and the acrid stench of blood mixed with cordite. Amorth moved on instinct, his body a weapon honed by months of guerrilla warfare. But amid the carnage, something gnawed at him, a hollow, unshakable dread that had nothing to do with the bullets whizzing past his head. Later, when the surviving partisans melted back into the shadows, their pockets stuffed with stolen grenades, Amorth lingered. He knelt beside a dead SS officer, the man's eyes frozen wide in shock. A silver rosary glinted in the corpse's clenched fist. Why? Amorth's mind raced. What does a butcher pray for before he dies? The question haunted him. War had sculpted Amorth into a soldier, but it was the silence between battles that forged the man. Born in 1925 to a middle-class family in Modena, he'd grown up under Mussolini's thumb, reciting fascist slogans in school and watching neighbors vanish into the night for whispering dissent. His father, a mild-mannered clerk, had secretly stockpiled banned books, Dostoevsky, Aquinas, Augustine, which young Gabriele devoured by candlelight. By 17, he joined the Brigate Garibaldi, communist partisans who struck like phantoms and paid for it in blood. But as the war dragged on, Amorth began to see cracks in the cause. He watched comrades execute informers without trial, their faces twisted with the same rage they'd once condemned. He found a fascist boy, no older than 14, sobbing in a ditch with a bullet in his gut, and hesitated before finishing him off. The boy's last words were "Mamma." "Che cosa siamo diventati?" Amorth whispered one night to Carlo, after a botched raid left 3 civilians dead. "What have we become?" Carlo spat. "Soldati, e I soldati non fanno domande." Soldiers, and soldiers don't ask questions. But Amorth couldn't stop asking. The turning point came in the winter of 1945. The Allies were advancing, and the Nazis, desperate, began torching villages suspected of harboring partisans. Amorth's unit was ordered to intercept a death squad near the Apennines. They arrived too late. The village of Sant'Anna di Stazzema was a charnel house. Bodies lay piled in the square, mothers clutching infants, old men shot in the back. Amorth staggered through the smoke, his boots slipping in blood. In the church, he found a priest nailed to the altar, his cassock drenched crimson. The man's lips were still moving in prayer. Amorth fell to his knees and vomited. That night, as he huddled in a frozen barn, a dream seized him. A figure in white stood amid a battlefield, untouched by the chaos. Non combattere più la carne e il sangue, the figure said. Fight not against flesh and blood. When Amorth woke, his cheeks were wet. By war's end, Modena lay in ruins, but the real battle was just beginning. Amorth traded his gun for a Bible. In 1947, he entered the seminary, shocking former comrades who called him a coward. The devil doesn't hide in trenches, he told them. He hides in men's souls. His superiors quickly noticed his zeal. Where other seminarians debated theology, Amorth prowled the library, devouring texts on exorcism and medieval demonology. He wrote feverish essays on St. Paul's warning, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers." Rumors swirled. A visiting bishop accused him of morbid fascination, but Amorth stood firm. Evil is real, he insisted, and it must be fought. In 1954, newly ordained Father Amorth was summoned to a rural parish. A farmer's wife, they said, was screaming in tongues and hurling herself against walls. The woman's eyes were black pits. When Amorth pressed a crucifix to her forehead, she hissed like a wildcat. "Non puoi vincere," she snarled. "You cannot win." For hours he prayed, his voice steady despite the sweat soaking his cassock. At dawn, the woman collapsed, sobbing. She remembered nothing. Amorth left the house trembling, not with fear, but recognition. This was his new battlefield. The resistance had taught him to stalk shadows. The seminary taught him to see the shadow behind the shadow. Gabriele Amorth, the soldier priest, had found his war, and hell had no idea what was coming. Chapter 2: The Making of an Exorcist. Rome, 1985. The air inside the Basilica di Santa Maria sopra Minerva was thick with incense and dread. Father Gabriele Amorth stood in the shadow of a marble column, his fingers tracing the crucifix hidden beneath his cassock. The church, a Gothic fortress in the heart of the Eternal City, felt alien to him now. For years he'd ministered to rural parishes, coaxing doubters back to faith and comforting the dying. But this was a different kind of war. Across the nave, a woman writhed on the stone floor, her limbs contorted as if pulled by invisible strings. Her screams were guttural, inhuman. Around her, 4 altar boys held down her thrashing body, their faces pale as bone. At the center of the nightmare stood an elderly priest, Father Candido Amontini, his voice booming Latin prayers like artillery fire. "Exorcismus te, omnis immundus spiritus." Amorth's stomach clenched. He'd witnessed exorcisms before, but never like this. The woman's head snapped toward him, her eyes 2 voids. "Tu sei il prossimo," she snarled in a voice that seemed to crawl from the earth. "You're next." 3 days earlier, the summons had come. Cardinal Ugo Poletti, Vicar General of Rome, received Amorth in a dim study beneath the Vatican. The room smelled of aged parchment and myrrh. Poletti, a lion of a man with eyes that missed nothing, slid a dossier across the desk. Inside were reports of possession cases, over 300 in Rome alone that year. "The enemy grows bold," the cardinal said, lighting a cigar. "Our priests are overwhelmed. They lack fervor." Amorth stiffened. He knew the rumors. Modern bishops dismissed exorcisms as medieval hysteria. Psychiatrists labeled them psychosis. But the files told another story. Children levitating beds, grandmothers speaking ancient Aramaic, a lawyer clawing at his own eyes while reciting the Lord's Prayer backward. "Father Candido is old," Poletti continued. "He needs a successor, someone with a soldier's discipline and a martyr's heart." Amorth's pulse quickened. "I'm not worthy," he began. Poletti blew a smoke ring. "Demons don't care about worth. They care about fear. Do you fear them?" Amorth met his gaze. "No," the cardinal smiled. "Then let us begin." Training started at dawn. Father Candido, a wiry Franciscan whose hands trembled except when holding a crucifix, became Amorth's relentless tutor. Their classroom, a crypt beneath the Basilica of the Holy Cross, its walls lined with the bones of martyrs. "Forget what you know," Candido barked, tossing Amorth a battered copy of the Rituale Romanum, the Vatican's 17th century exorcism manual. "Demons lie, they distract, they wait. Your weapons are scripture, sacraments, and—" He tapped his temple. "Cold-blooded patience." Amorth learned fast. He memorized the rites, when to invoke Saint Michael, when to sprinkle blessed salt. He studied the signs of true possession, superhuman strength, revulsion to sacred objects, fluency in dead languages. But theory meant nothing, Candido warned, until he faced the abyss eye to eye. That test came on a sweltering July night. A teenage boy from Trastevere had begun vomiting nails after using a Ouija board. When Amorth entered the candlelit room, the boy lunged, teeth bared. Candido gripped Amorth's shoulder. "Listen," he whispered. The demon's voice was a chorus of shrieks. "He's mine. The fool invited me." Amorth's hand shook as he raised the ritual. "In nomine Patris—" "Weak," the boy spat. "You still dream of killing Nazis, don't you?" "Does God know you enjoyed it?" Amorth froze. The taunt struck like a blade. For years he'd confessed his wartime violence, but absolution never erased the memory of blood on his hands. Candido stepped in, roaring prayers until the boy collapsed. Afterward, the old priest cornered Amorth in the sacristy. "They'll weaponize your past, your doubts, your shame. Burn it all, or they'll burn you." Amorth's breaking point came in autumn. A nun from Sicily arrived at his office, her face serene but her hands bound. "Sister Lucia recites the Psalms backward and levitates during Mass," her mother superior confessed. For weeks, Amorth performed daily exorcisms. The demon mocked him, twisting Lucia's voice into his dead mother's. "Gabriele, why did you let them hang Marco?" He pressed on, fasting until he trembled, sleeping in the chapel. On the 40th day, as he anointed Lucia's forehead, she seized his wrist with bruising force. "Your cardinal hides sins darker than yours," the demon giggled. "Ask him about the boy in Castel Gandolfo." Amorth recoiled. Paletti? The church's scandals were no secret, but doubt was a crack the enemy could widen. He fled to the confessional, gasping prayers until dawn. Candido found him there. "You want certainty?" The old exorcist thrust a Bible into his hands. "The only certainty is Christus Victor. The rest is noise." By 1986, Amorth had survived 47 exorcisms. He learned to spot the enemy's tricks, how demons feigned mental illness, how they fled to the body's extremities when cornered. He carried holy water like ammunition, wore the stole as armor. But the true battle was internal. One night, after expelling a demon that had impersonated his father's dying voice, Amorth collapsed in his apartment. On his desk lay a faded photo, young Gabriele with the resistance, grinning beside a captured Nazi flag. He lit a match and held it to the corner. As flames consumed the image, he whispered, "Non sono più un soldato." I am no longer a soldier. The next morning, he returned to the crypt. Candido eyed him, then nodded. "Good. Now you're ready." The Vatican took notice. When Amorth expelled a demon from a Soviet diplomat's wife, a case that made Pravda sneer about papist witchcraft, Paletti summoned him. "You walk a razor's edge," the cardinal warned. "The world wants to laugh at us. Make them afraid to laugh." Amorth obeyed. He documented cases with clinical precision. A CEO speaking Sumerian, a toddler reciting Milton's Paradise Lost. He wrote articles, gave interviews, revived the church's atrophied exorcist corps. Critics called him a fanatic. Psychiatrists sued him for defamation. But the possessed kept coming, over 100,000 in his lifetime, by some counts. Yet in quiet moments he wondered, had the resistance prepared him for this? Or had the war carved a hollow in him, a void that evil rushed to fill? The answer came in 1990 during his most infamous case. A young bride named Elena, possessed after her fiancé dabbled in satanic rituals, had bitten through 3 restraints. As Amorth prayed, the demon raged. "You think you saved them? You only make us stronger." For the first time, Amorth laughed. "Idiota," he hissed. "If we were losing, you wouldn't scream so loud." Elena's body went slack. When she awoke, her first word was "Grazia." By the time Father Candido died in 1992, Amorth had become a legend and a target. Anonymous letters arrived at his door, filled with occult symbols. A demon, during an exorcism, hissed the name of his favorite cafe. But the boy who'd once fought Nazis now had the ultimate weapon. Faith stripped of illusion, hardened in the fire. Demons are like fascists, he told his new apprentices. They demand submission, so you never bow, not even an inch. The war raged on, but in Rome's shadows, a soldier priest stood ready, crucifix in hand, and hell itself held its breath. Chapter 3. Inside the Exorcist's Chamber. The air inside the room tasted of copper and burnt sage. Rome, 1997. The third-floor apartment on Via dei Bresciani looked ordinary from the street. Ivy crawling up cracked plaster, laundry fluttering on a neighbor's balcony. But behind its unmarked door, in a space no larger than a prison cell, a war raged. Gabriele Amorth's exorcism chamber was a theater of shadows. Walls lined with icons of saints, a wooden kneeler worn smooth by desperate hands, and a single iron crucifix bolted to the floor. No windows, no clocks, only a pitted brass bowl of holy water and a telephone, its cord cut to prevent demons from dialing out. Tonight's subject sat shackled to a chair. Her name is Clara, muttered Father Matteo, Amorth's newest apprentice. The young priest's collar was damp with sweat. 32, architect, no history of mental illness. She started sleepwalking to construction sites, reciting this. He handed Amorth a tape recorder. Amorth pressed play. A guttural voice snarled in Aramaic. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani? My God, why have you forsaken me? He switched it off. Where did she hear that? She's never opened a Bible. Amorth approached Clara. Her head lolled, greasy hair obscuring her face. He lifted her chin and froze. Her eyes were rolled back, leaving only veined white orbs. Regna terrae, cantate Deo, he began, tracing the cross on her forehead. Clara's back arched with a crack. The chair legs screeched against stone as she levitated 6 inches into the air. Matteo stumbled backward. Santissimo Dio! Amorth didn't flinch. He'd seen this before. The ritual always started the same way. Father Amorth would arrive at dawn, fasting since midnight, his stole and ritual book tucked into a battered leather satchel. He'd bless the room with salt. Peristam salam. Then wait. Some days a single soul staggered in. Others, a line coiled down the stairs. Mothers cradling catatonic children. Businessmen clawing at invisible insects on their skin. Teenagers reeking of vomited sulfur. Demons are parasites, Amorth taught Matteo. They thrive on shame, so you strip them of hiding places. Every session began with questions. Did you consult psychiatrists? Most had. Use Ouija boards? Many lied. Attend black masses? One banker laughed, then projectile vomited nails. Only when medical causes were ruled out did Amorth reach for the Ritual Romanum. But the book was just a tool. The real weapon was his voice, a bass growl that could switch from tender to thunderous mid-prayer. Impera tibi magna virtus crucis, he'd roar, pressing the crucifix to a writhing forehead. Exi spiritus immunde. Sometimes it took minutes, sometimes hours. Once a 14-year-old boy screamed for 3 days straight, his vocal cords shredding until Amorth discovered the demon's name hidden in the child's school ID number. Mephistopheles, 666. The boy survived. The demon didn't. Clara's case escalated fast. By the 4th session, she'd snapped 2 sets of restraints. Amorth ordered iron manacles. When Matteo protested, "This feels barbaric," the old exorcist glared. "You prefer letting her chew through her wrists?" The demon grew bolder. It mocked Amorth's war scars. "That shrapnel in your leg? We'll dance on your grave," spat in Latin, and once hurled the brass bowl across the room. Holy water sizzled on Clara's skin like acid. But Amorth's calm never broke. "Anger them," he instructed Matteo, "and they grow careless." On the 7th day, the entity slipped. "Non sono sola," Clara rasped during a lull. "I'm not alone." Amorth leaned close. How many? Her mouth twisted into a grin. Legioni? Legion. He hid his shock. Multiple possessions were rare and catastrophic. Later, reviewing Clara's tape recordings, he heard them. Overlapping voices in Greek, Hebrew, even Etruscan, a language dead for 2,000 years. We need the bishop's permission for a major exorcism, Matteo urged. Amorth shook his head. By the time the bureaucracy moves, she'll be dead. The showdown came at midnight. Amorth entered the chamber alone, clutching a relic, a splinter from St. Paul's prison cell. Clara hung upside down from the ceiling, her ankles bound by chains. The room reeked of rotting meat. Salve vecchio, the demons chorused. Hello, old man. He began the rite. What followed defied physics. Clara's body spun like a top, her screams harmonizing into a hellish hymn. Books flew off shelves. The crucifix rattled. Amorth's stole caught fire. He beat out the flames without missing a syllable. Then the taunts turned personal. Marco, the voices cooed, invoking his hanged friend. You watched him die. You wanted him dead. He loved your sister, didn't he? Amorth's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, the prayers faltered. Clara's hands shot out, clawing his cheek. Hypocrite! Blood dripped onto his collar. The demons cackled. That's when Amorth struck. In virtute spiritus sancti, he thundered, slamming the relic onto Clara's chest. Nomen tum est. He paused, gambling everything. Nomen tum est vanity. The room went silent. Amorth had guessed the lead demon's name, its fatal weakness. Clara collapsed, gasping. When she opened her eyes, they were brown again. Where am I? Outside, church bells tolled 3 a.m. Amorth slumped against the wall, trembling. The demons were gone, but they'd left a message. Carved into the floorboards where Clara had lain were words in archaic Italian. Ti aspettiamo. We're waiting for you. The chamber took its toll. Amorth developed arrhythmia. His hands shook unless clutching a rosary. Critics called him a fraud. Newspapers ran exposes titled The Devil's Lawyer. Even the church wavered until a Vatican-appointed psychiatrist, Dr. Valenti, demanded proof. Amorth gave it to him. During a live exorcism of a possessed nun, Dr. Valenti watched the woman's blood boil at the touch of sacramental wine. Her temperature hit 109 degrees Fahrenheit. She recited the Lord's Prayer backward, in flawless Elizabethan English. I'll draft a retraction, the pale psychiatrist stammered afterward. Amorth just handed him a tissue. The man's nose was bleeding. By 2000, the chamber had become a pilgrimage site. Amorth kept a ledger. Case 60,341 was a Scottish tourist possessed after stealing a bone from the catacombs of Domitilla. Case number 60,342, a toddler who'd never spoken suddenly chanting the Dies Irae. Each entry ended with a red stamp, Liberatus, but the victories cost him. One night, Matteo found Amorth staring at the floorboard carvings. Do they ever come back? The apprentice asked. Amorth lit a candle. Demons are patient, but so are we. On October 1st, 2005, an old woman shuffled into the chamber. Amorth froze. It was Elena, the bride he'd saved in 1990. Her face was gaunt, her arms covered in bite marks. They're back, she whispered. They say you're tired. Amorth's heart pounded. At 80, his strength was fading. But as Elena's head snapped back, revealing blackened eyes, he reached for his stole. Credo in unum Deum. The battle roared on. In the shadows, the iron crucifix gleamed, not with light, but defiance. Chapter 4. The Devil's Greatest Deceptions. The letter arrived on a blood-red envelope. Rome, 2006. Father Gabriele Amorth sat in his cluttered office, surrounded by stacks of case files and votive candles. The postmark was German. Inside, a single phrase was scrawled in jagged script. Danke für die Inspiration. Thanks for the inspiration. Below it, a photocopied page from Mein Kampf, Hitler's manifesto, with a passage underlined. The devil is our ally in the fight against weakness. Amorth dropped the page like a live grenade. For years, he'd warned the Vatican that evil didn't just haunt individuals, it sculpted history. Now someone was listening. 3 weeks earlier, Amorth had ignited a firestorm. At a theology conference in Assisi, a young Jesuit had asked him, "Do demons truly influence world events?" Amorth's reply went viral. The 20th century alone, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, these weren't merely madmen. They were vessels. The devil's greatest trick isn't possession. It's convincing humanity he doesn't exist, or that he's on their side. The backlash was instant. Newspapers labeled him a conspiracy theorist. Historians scoffed. Even the Vatican issued a terse reminder that sin, not demons, explains human evil. But Amorth didn't relent. In interviews, he doubled down. Hitler's own niece claimed he conducted seances. Stalin studied to be a priest before turning to torture. Coincidence? Evil recruits. Then came the death threats. The real war, Amorth knew, wasn't fought in exorcism chambers. It was waged in bookstores, yoga studios, and children's bedrooms. "Modernity is the devil's playground," he growled to Father Matteo one evening, hurling a copy of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire onto his desk. The book levitated briefly before slamming down, a parlor trick from a demon he'd trapped inside a tea kettle years prior. Wizards, spells, they make the occult adorable. Matteo frowned. But the church approved these books. They're fantasy. So were Ouija boards, until teenagers started vomiting nails. Amorth stabbed a finger at the novel. Rowling says her magic isn't real? The devil loves that lie. First you dabble, then you doubt, then... He tossed Matteo a file. A 12-year-old Belgian girl hospitalized after reciting Potter spells over her cat. The animal had suffocated her baby brother. "Madre di Dio," Matteo whispered. Amorth's eyes darkened. "Check the footnote." The exorcism report noted the girl's final scream before liberation. Voldemort sends his regards. Yoga was next. When a Milanese housewife sought Amorth's help in 2007, her hands bleeding from self-inflicted stigmata after a holy yoga retreat, he stormed into Cardinal Paletti's successor's office. "Ban these classes," he demanded, slapping photos of the woman's twisted limbs on the desk. "Hindu mantras open spiritual doors. Even Satanists know that." The new cardinal, a pragmatic diplomat, sighed. "Yoga is exercise, Father. The church can't police stretching." Amorth leaned in, his voice ablade. "And the Inquisition couldn't police books. Look how that turned out." That night he gave an interview to La Repubblica. "Yoga is satanic. So are Pokemon. So is rock music. Why? Because they distract." The headline made him a global punchline. But in Kerala, India, a Hindu nationalist group burned his effigy. In Arkansas, a megachurch launched anti-yoga Sundays. Amorth's warnings, ridiculed by elites, had struck a nerve in the shadows. The devil's true masterpiece, though, was subtler. In 2009, Amorth investigated a possessed engineer in Naples. The man had designed AI software for a Vatican-backed charity. During the exorcism, the demon bragged, "You think we only haunt people? Wait till we live in the machines." Amorth had the man's hard drives melted down. But the incident birthed a chilling theory. What if Satan no longer needed possession? What if he could infest systems instead of souls? "Evolution," Amorth wrote in his memoir. "The enemy adapts. Yesterday, he whispered to dictators. Today, he's in the Wi-Fi." Critics rolled their eyes. Then in 2012, a cybersecurity firm found malware on the Vatican servers, code that rearranged itself into Latin hexes when isolated. The final confrontation came at a university debate in Padua. Amorth faced off against Dr. Lucia Ferri, Italy's foremost skeptic. A packed auditorium buzzed as she mocked his Hitler theory. "By your logic, Father, every tyrant's a puppet. Where does free will end and the devil made me do it begin?" Amorth didn't blink. Did Hitler have free will when he gassed children? Of course, but evil amplifies evil. The devil doesn't possess, he seduces. A whisper here, a nightmare there, until one day, he snapped his fingers. "You're ordering genocide and calling it progress." A student shouted, "What about Harry Potter?" I read it. "No demons here." Amorth smiled. "Not yet, but close your eyes. He gestured to the crowd. All of you. Imagine a world where evil is boring, where hell is bureaucracy, demons are lawyers, and Satan's a CEO in a nice suit. That's his plan, make evil ordinary. The room fell silent. Fairy scoffed. Fear-mongering. Amorth turned to leave, then froze. A cold draft swept the stage. The microphone screeched feedback, and for a heartbeat the skeptic's face flickered, her eyes flooding black. The crowd gasped. By the time cameras focused, the illusion, if it was one, had passed. That night, Amorth found another red envelope on his doorstep. Inside was a photo of his childhood home in Modena, burned to rubble in 1944. On the back, a note, Danke nochmal. Thanks again. He incinerated it with a candle. But as he prayed, a realization coiled around his heart. The devil wasn't just in dictators or dark rituals. He was in the eye rolls of intellectuals, the clickbait mocking faith, the slow erosion of the sacred into content. Amorth's war had always been against the unseen. Now the unseen was everywhere. In 2016, weeks before his death, a journalist asked him, after 70,000 exorcisms, what's the devil's greatest weakness? Amorth grinned. The same as Hitler's, vanity. He died as he lived, between two worlds, his legacy debated, his warnings echoing into a future he'd fought to protect. And in a world increasingly addicted to screens, spells, and self-help mysticism, his words lingered like smoke after a battle. The devil fears only one thing, being seen. But no one was looking. Chapter 5. The Exorcist's Most Terrifying Battles. The scream tore through the convent like a siren. Rome, 2003. Sister Maria, a nun of 40 years, hung suspended in midair, her habit billowing as if caught in an invisible storm. Her face, once serene, contorted into a mask of primal rage, lips peeling back to reveal gums bleeding black bile. Across the room, Father Gabriele Amorth stood firm, his stole clutched in one hand, a vial of holy water in the other. The air reeked of sulfur and burnt roses. In the name of Christ, I command you, reveal your name, Amorth boomed. The nun's body snapped into a grotesque arch, her spine cracking like kindling. When she spoke, the voice was a chorus of snarls. We are the ones who drowned Sodom, who gnawed Judas's bones, and we will feast on your corpse, old man. Amorth smirked. Mangia meglio, Allora. Eat better, then. He flung the holy water. The room exploded in chaos. Amorth's career was a tapestry of such horrors. Over 100,000 exorcisms, each a skirmish in a war without end. But a handful of battles etched themselves into legend. Encounters so visceral they blurred the line between faith and nightmare. Case number 19,302, the architect who spoke in tongues of fire. Turin, 1991. Renzo Moretti, a rationalist engineer, had designed skyscrapers from Dubai to New York. Then after a trip to Pompeii, he began sleepwalking to construction sites, reciting curses in extinct Oscan. By the time Amorth arrived, Moretti's penthouse was a charnel house. Walls clawed raw, crucifixes melted into slag. Non sono pazzo, Moretti hissed, bound to a steel chair. I'm not crazy. Amorth noted the man's eyes, pupils slit like a goat's. When he pressed a relic of St. Michael to Moretti's wrist, the skin blistered. The exorcism lasted 9 days. On the 7th night, Moretti's body temperature spiked to 111 degrees Fahrenheit. His sweat evaporated into steam as he bellowed the Dies Irae in flawless Gregorian Latin. Amorth, fasting and sleepless, countered with psalms until his voice frayed to a whisper. At dawn, the demon broke. Il mio nome è Abaddon, Moretti howled, naming the angel of the abyss. Amorth struck. Abaddon, by the blood of the Lamb, I cast you into oblivion. The engineer collapsed, sobbing. When he awoke, he designed only churches. Case number 34,455, The Girl Who Knew Secrets, Assisi, 1998. 8-year-old Lucia Volpe had never left her village. Yet during her possession, she revealed the sins of everyone in the room, a priest's affair, a nun's abortion, Amorth's long-buried guilt over a resistance informer he'd executed. You still hear his screams, don't you? Lucia taunted, her voice a guttural growl. Giovanni begged for his mother. You shot him anyway. Amorth faltered. The demon had unearthed a memory he'd confessed decades ago, but never forgiven himself for. Lucia levitated, grinning. Hypocrite! How dare you judge me? For a heartbeat, the exorcist's prayers died on his lips. Then, clutching his rosary, he roared, I am a sinner, but you are nothing without his permission. The girl dropped like a stone. When her mother rushed in, Lucia whispered, The bad man's gone. He was scared of you. Case number 50,112. The Politician and the Ice Coffin, Milan, 2006. Senator Edoardo Conti, a rising star in Italy's parliament, had begun oozing black fluid from his pores. His aides claimed he'd negotiated with the wrong people. Amorth found Conti in a penthouse sealed with industrial freezers, his breath frosting the air. The senator's skin had turned translucent, veins pulsing blue. Cold, Conti rasped. So cold. The moment Amorth began the rite, the room plunged to Arctic temperatures. Wine froze in its bottle. The senator's tongue split into a forked appendage, hissing, We made him great. Now we'll make him ours. Amorth's fingers stuck to the crucifix as he prayed. Frostbite blistered his cheeks. You want cold? He gritted, flinging holy water. Taste the fire of heaven. Steam erupted where the droplets struck Conti. The demon shrieked, a sound like glaciers calving, and fled. Conti resigned the next day, entering a monastery. The battle that nearly broke him. Venice, 2010. Amorth, 85 and ailing, faced his most personal demon. Marco Rinaldi, a 30-year-old fisherman, had been possessed after rescuing a drowning man during a storm. The entity mirrored Amorth's younger self, mocking his wartime kills, his vainglorious crusade. You love this, the demon sneered through Rinaldi. Playing hero again, pathetic. Amorth's hands trembled. IV bruises mottled his arms from recent hospital stays. The fisherman's body began to morph, jaw elongating, teeth sharpening into fangs. A shadow swelled behind him, dripping tendrils of darkness. You're too weak to finish this, the demon gloated. Amorth staggered, clutching his chest. For the first time, he felt old. Then laughter. The exorcist wheezed, doubling over. Not in pain, but mirth. Idiot! You think I'm the one fighting you? He slammed his fist on the Bible. He is! The room detonated with light. When Rinaldi awoke, Amorth was slumped in a chair, grinning. See? Even on my worst day, he still wins. The Last Stand, Rome, 2016. Weeks before his death, Amorth took his final case. A Colombian girl named Paloma, who'd ingested a cursed Eucharist during a satanic mass. Her body twisted into impossible shapes, spine coiling like a spring, fingers fusing into claws. During the exorcism, Paloma's mouth distended into a gaping maw, spewing locusts and a voice that shook the walls. We know where you go when you die. Amorth, gaunt and wheelchair-bound, merely raised his stole. And I know who waits for me. For 12 hours he dueled the entity, his prayers reduced to rasps until the girl's body stilled. As dawn broke, Paloma hugged him. Gracias, abuelo, she whispered. Tears cut tracks through Amorth's stubble. Prego, bambina, he murmured. You're welcome, child. Amorth died on September 16, 2016. His legacy was etched in scars, on bodies he'd freed, on a church that feared his fervor, and on a world increasingly skeptical of the unseen. Yet in his final interview, he distilled his mission to its essence. Demons exist. Angels exist. For some, life is a horror story. But we, he winked, we get to write the ending. In the shadows, the war raged on. But for Amorth, the soldier priest, there was peace, and the glimmer of a crucifix raised in eternal defiance. Chapter 6. Secrets of the Vatican's Demon Hunter. The letter arrived at midnight, sealed with wax the color of dried blood. Vatican City, 1999. Cardinal Vittorio Rossi, a reformist known for dismantling traditionalist superstitions, lay dead in his apartment. The official report called it a heart attack. But the scratches on the floor, deep, jagged furrows trailing from his bed to a shattered mirror, told a different story. Gabriele Amorth stood in the dim light, his breath fogging the air despite the stifling Roman heat. The room reeked of spoiled incense and something darker, metallic, fear. Non toccare niente, Father Amorth ordered the trembling gendarme. Touch nothing. He knelt, fingertips brushing the cardinal's stiffened hand. The skin was ice cold, the pupils dilated into black coins. A single word was etched into the mirror's glass, visible only when Amorth angled his flashlight. Legio. Legion. He crossed himself. The devil hadn't just breached the Vatican's walls, he'd pitched camp in its heart. Amorth's war had always been solitary, but by the late 1990s he realized the true battlefield wasn't haunted houses or howling possessed souls. It was the labyrinthine corridors of the Holy See itself. The smoke of Satan, he warned in a La Stampa interview, invoking Pope Paul VI's infamous 1972 homily, entered through the keyhole here, and some men held the door open. His claims ignited a firestorm. Traditionalists hailed him as a prophet. Reformers branded him a paranoid reactionary. Behind closed doors, bishops whispered of retirement homes far from Rome. But Father Amorth's evidence mounted. Secret number 1, the cult of the red cords. In 2001, during an exorcism of a Swiss Guard recruit, the demon sneered, "Your precious college of cardinals drinks our wine." Father Amorth pressed, and the entity spat out names. 3 high-ranking prelates who allegedly practiced blood rites in a hidden chapel beneath the Vatican necropolis. Amorth stormed into Cardinal Paletti's office. "Investigate," the cardinal sighed. "Without proof, we risk scandal." Scandal? Father Amorth slammed a photo on the desk, a 16th century fresco in the Vatican archives, depicting clerics in red sashes binding a goat-headed figure. They're using this as a manual. The fresco vanished the next day. Secret number 2, the bishops who didn't believe. His fiercest foes weren't demons, but fellow clergy. Modern bishops, he wrote in his memoir, would diagnose Christ's miracles as mass hysteria. In 2005, he confronted a seminary rector in Naples who'd banned exorcism training. "Your students think possession is metaphor," Amorth thundered. The rector smirked. "And you think yoga is satanic? We've moved past the Dark Ages, Father." That night, he received an anonymous call. The rector's protege, a newly ordained priest, had gouged out his eyes during Mass, screaming about worms in the Eucharist. He arrived to find the church sealed, the incident buried. Secret number 3, the Exorcist spy. To navigate Vatican politics, he recruited allies in the shadows. Sister Lucia, a Polish archivist with a photographic memory, smuggled him records of 18th century exorcisms and modern cover-ups. "They're dissolving the rite," she warned in 2008, slipping him a memo. A progressive cardinal had proposed replacing exorcists with deliverance ministers trained in psychology. He leaked the memo to traditionalist blogs. The backlash forced a retreat, but cost him allies. "You're making enemies of men who'll outlive you," Sister Lucia cautioned. Amorth lit a candle to St. Michael. "Then I'll outlive them here." The breaking point came in 2012. A Vatican accountant, deep in debt, had sold artifacts to a Luciferian sect. Among them, the Crocifisso Maledetto, a 14th century crucifix used to torture heretics. When Amorth tracked it to a Paris auction house, he found the buyer's name redacted, except for a telltale insignia, 3 intertwined crosses, the symbol of a cardinal's private secretary. Amorth confronted the Vatican Secretary of State. "This is beyond your jurisdiction," the secretary hissed. "Is it?" Amorth dropped a file. Photos of the accountant's corpse, wrists slit in a perfect X. The devil collects debts faster than the Bank of Italy. The crucifix reappeared in a Vatican vault the next week. No investigation followed. Amorth's revelations made him a pariah and a beacon. Young priests flocked to his lectures, smuggling Rituale Romanum guides in their breviaries. Traditionalist cardinals sent him encrypted letters, begging for discreet exorcisms. Even Pope Benedict XVI privately endorsed his crusade, though never publicly. "The church is a hospital," Amorth told a packed seminary in 2014. But if the doctors deny the plague, the patients die. His bluntness drew fire. Critics leaked his health records, a heart condition, arthritis, to paint him as a deluded old man. A New York Times profile dubbed him the devil's publicist, accusing him of fueling conspiracy theories. But the possessed kept coming. In 2015, an African cardinal sought Amorth's help after witnessing a mass in Congo where congregants vomited snakes. "They say it's the Holy Spirit," the cardinal whispered. Amorth handed him a vial of holy water. "Test it." The next day, the cardinal called, voice shaking. The water boiled in their mouths. His final battle wasn't against a demon, but bureaucracy. Days before his death in 2016, he received a summons to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Monsignor Alberto Conti, a sleek canon lawyer, slid a document across the table. A decree restricting exorcisms to priests with psychological training. He laughed. "You'll need psychologists for the psychologists they possess." Conti stiffened. "Your methods are medieval." Amorth leaned in, his voice a rasp. "And yours are suicide. But don't worry, Monsignor." He stood clutching his cane. "When they come for you, and they will, you'll beg for a medievalist." The decree passed 6 months after his death. Gabriele Amorth died as he lived, suspended between reverence and ridicule, his warnings echoing in the silence they carved. To critics, he was a zealot who saw demons in dust motes. To believers, he was the Church's last honest soldier. But in the Vatican's deepest archives, a file remains sealed until 2100. Its contents? Rumors swirl. Exorcism logs naming powerful figures, photos of rituals in sacred spaces, a list of compromised clerics. Sister Lucia, now 89, smiles when asked. "Father Amorth's final exorcism isn't over," she says. "He left traps." Traps or prayers? In the end, even his enemies conceded. Father Gabriele Amorth fought not for the Church of men, but the Church of angels. And in that war, he knew the stakes were eternal. As he once growled to a demon taunting him about retirement, "I'll rest when you do." Some say in the quiet of the exorcism chamber, you can still hear hell shudder. Chapter 7, The Vanguard of Deliverance, A New Generation Rises. Madrid, 2023. The basement of San Lorenzo Church reeked of scorched iron and decay. Father Jose Antonio Fortea, Spain's most feared exorcist, knelt beside a teenage girl strapped to a rusted chair. Her wrist bled where the restraints bit into flesh, and her voice, a guttural snarl, shook the flickering light bulbs overhead. "You're too late," the demon hissed in medieval Catalan, a language dead for centuries. "She's ours." Fortea's hand didn't waver as he raised his crucifix. "In the name of Gabriele Amorth," he thundered, "I command you, be gone." The girl's body convulsed, then stilled. When her eyes fluttered open, clear and human, Fortea allowed himself a grim smile. Amorth's playbook still works. Gabriele Amorth's war didn't die with him. It multiplied. In 1990, decades before his name became synonymous with spiritual combat, he co-founded the International Association of Exorcists, IAE, a clandestine brotherhood of priests, psychiatrists, and theologians united by one creed. Evil is real, fight it. The Vatican initially dismissed them as fanatics, but as possession cases surged, linked to everything from dark web rituals to opioid addiction, the IAE became the Church's SEAL Team 6. His rules were merciless. No exorcism without medical proof. A Colombian priest once misdiagnosed schizophrenia. The demon sued for defamation. Never work alone. A French exorcist disappeared in 2001. His stole was found nailed to a forest oak. Trust no one, especially bishops. They'll sell your soul to the New York Times, he warned. By 2014, when the Vatican finally recognized the IAE, its members operated in 30 countries. Their manual? Amorth's An Exorcist tells his story, a blood and thunder memoir that outsold the Da Vinci Code in Italy. Rome, 2016. The IAE's covert seminary hid beneath a Franciscan monastery, its walls lined with relics of martyred saints. Here, recruits endured a boot camp designed by Amorth himself. Father Vincenzo, a 28-year-old Sicilian, still nightmares about week 3. They locked us in a pitch-black chapel with a recording of a possessed nun. Her screams sounded like animals being skinned alive. We had to recite the rite flawlessly, fail, and they played it again. The curriculum was brutal: demonic linguistics, identifying ancient tongues, Aramaic, Akkadian, disguised as glossolalia. Combat rituals, using incense to mask sulfur, holy water as a weapon. Psychological warfare, spotting demons who impersonate dead relatives. They always get the eyes wrong, he noted. Graduates received a crucifix, a copy of an Exorcist explains the demonic, and a warning: your parish will fear you, your bishop will disavow you, but the lost will find you. Father Fortea, Amorth's most famous disciple, never met his mentor, but in 1998, after a Madrid socialite began speaking in the voice of her drowned twin, Fortea devoured his books. He wrote like a general, Fortea tells me, his office littered with cursed artifacts, a voodoo doll from Haiti, a TikTok phone that streams satanic ASMR. Not theology, battle plans. In 2006, Fortea's trial by fire made headlines. A Barcelona architect, possessed after renovating a medieval abbey, levitated during Mass and recited the Malleus Maleficarum backward. Fortea performed 34 exorcisms over 2 months. On the final day, the man vomited a 15th century Templar ring, now displayed in Fortea's trophy case. Father Amorth is watching, Fortea says. We all feel it. Chicago, 2022. Archbishop Cardinal Blas Kupich greenlit the Archdiocese's first exorcism team after a wave of teen suicides linked to a Ouija app. The leader? Father Chad Ripperger, a brash IAE member who credits Amorth for kicking the church's ass into gear. Ripperger's tactics were rapid response teams for emergency exorcisms, tech exorcisms, blessing iPhones infected with digital demons, AI chatbots trained on occult texts, sacramental kung fu, using blessed oil like pepper spray, a drop to the forehead, and bam, Satan's crying mascara, Ripperger jokes. Father Gabriele Amorth's final prophecy haunts the IAE. The devil's next battlefield is the mind. They're ready. In Uganda, exorcists combat zombie curses spread by witch doctors. In South Korea, priests deprogram K-pop fans ensnared in idol worship cults. In Rome, the IAE's cyber exorcism unit battles AI-generated deepfakes of satanic rituals. Yet Amorth's shadow looms largest in quiet moments. Before each exorcism, IAE members touch the photo in his books, the grizzled priest gripping a crucifix like a dagger. We're his hands now, says Father Vincenzo, fresh from liberating a Milanese toddler who predicted earthquakes. And we're just getting started. As midnight bells echo through Madrid, Fortea receives a text. A Parisian girl's TikTok account streams her speaking Sumerian. He grabs his stole, grinning. The war is eternal, but so are we. Somewhere, Father Gabriele Amorth laughs, and the demons shudder.